Hi everyone, hope you guys are all doing well. Just wanted to do a video that's different from our most recent coin roll hunting videos. I know we've been putting out quite a bit of nickel coin roll hunting videos in the last couple of weeks. And also too, I just want to focus a little bit more on silver stacking and focus more particularly on the question of whether or not Canadians need to stack silver. And I think that this is important just by looking at whether silver stacking makes sense generally, but also too just to kind of get rid of the myth that it's important just for Americans to stack silver. I know that I'm guilty of it myself. Every time I do an informational video on silver stacking, I like to look at American statistics, also to Federal Reserve policy and Federal Reserve news. Those are really the big topic news items of the day, so they're important to look at. But it's important not to forget too that the same thing applies to Canadians. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about why it might make sense for Canadians to stack silver, and also too why as a Canadian, my brother and I are looking to stack silver as well. So what I'm going to do is just focus on some fiscal and monetary policies and some statistics, which are the main reasons why we choose to stack silver. But before we look at those statistics, I just wanted to point out two news articles that right now have a big bearing on what we like to do with our money. And of course, that's either coin roll hunting or stacking silver or even getting into gold hopefully one day. And right now, there's a big concern up here in Canada with our housing market, especially as it relates to household debt. So we'll get into some of the statistics in a bit, and of course I'll put these two news articles down in the description below. But right now the housing market definitely has me a bit worried. Luckily though, with knowledge does come a little bit less fear, and you can kind of prepare for some of this stuff. But right now up in Canada, there's a huge question mark over what's going to happen with our housing market, especially as it relates to household debt. And that's a good read just to look at really how bad Canadians have gotten themselves into debt and some of the consequences that could stem from that. And then also too, I just found this Huffington Post article about a Canadian banking crisis that's potentially on the horizon. Of course too, I like to point out that the don't panic is important. Of course, I like to think that people in the silver stacking community, and just mostly people who hang out online, they have a better knowledge of what's going on than people who are offline. So I think that it's important to be able to use our knowledge and not really panic too much. But again, just to start off, there's two major things that's going on right now that's motivating our silver stacking, and that's household debt coupled with a potential crash in the housing market. And then also too, because of these things, really they're all taken together, a potential banking crisis up here in Canada. And just lastly, before we look at some of the statistics, it is important too just to note that even if it was just an American issue, if let's say something happened with the US dollar, inflationary event, let's call it. It doesn't even need to be hyperinflation. Even if Canada had no monetary and fiscal problems of their own, just because the US is by far the biggest economy in the world and extremely important as it relates to the Canadian economy, it would probably be a good idea for Canadians to stack silver, just because that's going to cause quite a bit of repercussions up here as well. So those are all good reasons to stack silver. But let's look at some of the statistics, and the most important one that we focus on is just the increase in the money supply. And right now we're looking at the M2 money supply, and Canada's information is on the black line, and then the US data is the blue line. So as you can see here, there's been a significant increase in the money supply in both the US and Canada. So as we would define inflation as an increase in the money supply, Canada is definitely not immune from the inflationary monetary policies that the United States is undergoing as well. So this one for us is definitely our biggest reason for why we choose to put some of our wealth into silver. As you can see, especially since about 2008, but really even going back to 1998 up here in Canada, there's just been a huge increase in the money supply, more than doubling in that period, almost tripling. So the money supply increase is definitely one reason why as Canadians we're choosing to stack silver. a lot of people look at the American interest rate right now being so low as being an inflationary consequence somewhere down the road. But as you can see here, again, to Canada just being the black line, right now we're under the exact same interest rate that the US is going. We're at 1% rather than the 0.25%. But still, if you're worried about in the States the interest rates being too low for too long, then up here in Canada it's no different. It's just as bad. And even too, if you look all the way back from 1992, there's definitely a downward trend in the interest rate environment, and even almost more pronounced so up here in Canada. So one of the second reason too is just interest rates in general. When you keep interest rates too low for too long, it's definitely going to create a lot more supply of money, and also to a lot more malinvestment. People are going to be using that newly created money for things that they otherwise wouldn't have. And these interest rates being low up here in Canada for this long is definitely what's causing the household debt to increase, as we saw in that first news article, and then also too having a really negative consequence on the housing market, where right now up here in Canada, I read a report where 20 Canadian cities have unaffordable housing. So the interest rates are too low for too long up here in Canada as well. Just looking here at the central bank balance sheet, so what the American Federal Reserve and what the Bank of Canada have on their balance sheets, you can see that all the way back from 2008, there's just been a huge explosion in both central banks' balance sheets. And of course, the big question is what they're going to do to get some of these numbers off their balance sheet. What I think will happen is at some point they're going to have to liquidate this debt, and by liquidating it, what they'll have to do is just print money, because a lot of it is just unsellable debt in the form of mortgages that are probably not going to be selling for what their values were initially. They're probably just going to have to print the money and liquidate these debts just through inflation. So Canada, again, is not immune and not different than the American Central Bank. Since 2008, there's been a huge increase in the Canadian Central Bank balance sheet. And also too, we like to focus on just the fiscal policies. For the Canadian government, you can see going back all the way to about the 1960s, there's been just a gradual increase and a sustained rise in the amount of government spending. And the same thing with the US, although it has dropped off a bit and is starting even to level out a little bit up here in Canada. And one of the main consequences of governments continually increasing their spending is, as we'll see on this next statistic, is that the government debt to GDP is going to go up. Now, it is true that Canada has been doing quite well. We kind of learned our lesson in the mid-90s that we were getting ourselves into too much debt, and there was a pretty good job getting Canada out of its debt to GDP ratio as high as from the 100%, and we did drop it down below 70, but you can see again the key year of 2008 caused just a dramatic increase in not only the US but also in Canada too. So we're right up almost near 90 now. Really getting close to the American mark of 100%. So that 100% mark is a pretty significant historical mark. I believe that it goes where any country who was over 100% debt to GDP ratio never ends up paying back all of their debt. So with that in mind, it's a good indication that there's going to be quite a lot of inflation coming down the road, as it becomes pretty much impossible for these countries to pay off their debt once they hit that 100% range. And then the last statistic that we'll focus on is just a consequence of all the previous statistics that we looked at, with interest rates being too low, an increase in the money supply, and of course government spending and government indebtedness. There's going to be a consequence of an increase in the consumer price index. So these CPIs aren't perfect, but as you can see, there is a sustained increase in prices, which of course is driven by the increase in inflation and the increase in the money supply, and not vice versa, as a lot of people like to confuse it. It's not there's no increase in money supply because prices go up. It's the other way around. Money increases first, and it causes a consequence of an increase in prices. So I just thought that I would focus on that, and as you could see in all 6 of those charts, the Canadian numbers are right there in line with the American numbers, and it definitely is not a situation where it's only an American concern, that is inflation. Americans aren't the only ones that need to be concerned about the fiscal and monetary policies of its government, and therefore have to protect themselves from inflation by putting their money into gold and silver. It's definitely, in my opinion, very prudent and responsible for Canadians to at least understand these numbers. And when understanding them, my brother and I, we decided that we need to put some of our wealth into gold and silver just to try to protect it as much as we can, because these fiscal and monetary policies will, in our opinion, lead to inflation and already have led to inflation as well. So I just thought that I would point that out. As I mentioned before, I'll put the 2 links to the articles down in the description. Also to just mention it down in the comment section below, or send me a private message and I'll send you a link to where you can get the information for all these charts. It shouldn't be too hard. It's on tradingeconomics.com, but if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to help you through that. But thank you very much. I hope you guys found this video interesting. I just thought that I would put to rest any notion that Canadians are different from Americans when it comes to silver stacking, and also to just try to move a little bit away from the fact that we always focus on American data and the Federal Reserve, and not really having anything to worry about up here in Canada. But thank you so much for watching. If you could like the video or subscribe to the channel, we always greatly appreciate that. I hope to come out with a couple of more silver videos in the next couple of days, and as we approach the weekend, we'll do another pickup of nickel boxes, so of course we'll have a lot of coin roll hunting videos on the horizon as well. But thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you guys all have a great day, and I'll see you next video. Bye for now.